That was just embarrassing. Two halves of football, right? And Penn State didn't even show up for the other one.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That is right. You are locked on to Penn State football. And thank you for joining me on this live post-game show to talk about Penn State and Ohio State because, well, we have to. We are going to address the head coaching search because Brent Key is set to interview. Clark Lea is a target, the Vanderbilt head coach. So we'll get into that later on in the show. But we actually do have to talk about the game itself. Fire Andy Kotelnicki. Changes might need to be made before the season's over. We'll address that in the upcoming segment. But we got to begin with just rapid fire takeaways about Penn State versus Ohio State, because that was a tale of two completely different halves. And which is why it's going to prompt discussions about who should stay, who should go, because no adjustments were made in the second half by one team. And that one team was not Ohio State. Again, I am grateful for each and every one of you stopping by to hear me rant and rave about this Penn State football team. So I hope you can enjoy this one, because I don't know that I will enjoy this conversation very much. No, I like talking Penn State football, for better or for worse, but preferably better. Okay, so just overall, the first things that come to mind here: Ohio State's a really good team. They're elite across the board, quarterback all the way down to punter. They have a punter, apparently. Yeah, they do. Penn State did get a couple of stops there to force the special teams unit to actually have to be utilized in this game. But Ohio State was just that much better. They weren't trying. Now, I will say this carefully. I will say this when I say this a little lightly, when I say that Penn State or Ohio State was not trying in the first half, or at least they weren't trying enough. 17-14, they clearly had dialed some things back. And then Ryan Day went into the locker room, got the guys fired up, got them rallied, and it took them just half of the third quarter to pull away from Penn State. So they turned it up to probably a level 8 or a level 9 from a level 2 or 3. I think Penn State saw level 2, level 3, maybe a max of level 4 in the first half from Ohio State. They doubled that because I don't think they went to a 10. They did not reach on the 10 scale. And Ohio State still made them look like one of the worst teams in the Big Ten because, well, at this point, they are. Because I liked what Penn State was doing. Now, some of those points, did they come by luck? Maybe, because Penn State was gifted a fumble inside, Ohio State's 15? It should have been at the very minimum 20-7. So this game looked a lot more flattering to the eye test because, hey, it's 17-14. But once again, a team just makes a detrimental mistake going into the halftime, and it looks like Penn State's doing so much better than they are, when in reality it's just not the case. Iowa did that too. They shouldn't have attempted that was a 60 or a 65-yard field goal even. Penn State gets a block, and they shouldn't have had those points if you make the right decision in that given moment. So that's really it. Ohio State's just that much better. They tried for a half of a third quarter, and it led to 38-14, and then Penn State was just absolutely demoralized. I give Terry Smith a lot of credit. Here's another instant takeaway. I give Terry Smith a ton of credit for trying. And he should get a fair shot at being Penn State's next head coach. But at the end of the day, players are still quitting. Coaches are still quitting. Yes, it's not just on the players. It's easy to say that, hey, that guy's not giving 110%. It's understandable. It's not acceptable. I'm not condoning it. It's understandable because after how many heartbreaking losses by a combined 13 points, and we're supposed to expect that all of these guys are just supposed to show up, give 110%, like they don't have futures on the line or anything like that. If you want me to name names, I can. One of them's Andy Kotelnicki, because he coached today like he doesn't want to be employed by Penn State anymore. So it's not just on the players. It is on the person. It's on the staff as well. Guys just aren't giving it their all. The second Ohio State stepped on the gas, they said, whoa, 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 we don't want to deal with that. Penn State got ambushed, and then everything shut down from there, because when they went into the second half, Penn State called what, the same 5-6 plays? Nothing that was working in the first half on the offense was carried over to the second half. None of it. They were running 6, 7 offensive lineman formations. They were actually moving the football with Allen and Singleton. And that just went away. Ohio State goes up by 10 points. And it's like, well, we can't run these plays anymore. It was a 10-point deficit. No intermediate, no long passes, no explosive, nothing to set up. And then when Penn State did just run, hey, let's run a basic, and I say basic from the outside perspective. It's probably a lot more complex in the playbook, in the locker room, whatever, when they're actually developing these plays. But from my point of view, and probably a lot of other fans, when it's all the gimmick and stuff like that from Kotelnicki, and you just dial up, a simple in comparison. There's not this trick and this needs to happen, and let's pitch the football here, and Liam Clifford's a quarterback. It's just, let's line up, have a 5 offensive lineman pocket for Ethan Grunkemeyer to stand there. I give Grunkemeyer a ton of credit. In his second career start, he was inaccurate at times, and I'm going to criticize him for that, because I would expect just better passing out of him. He was a top 10 quarterback recruit. He was a top 100 player in his respective recruiting class. So he should hit most of those passes to wide open receivers. He missed on a few of them, which is discouraging. But for a guy that is in his second career start against either the number 1 or number 2 defense, depending on what stats you look at, this is a top 3 defense, conservatively speaking. And Grunk stood in the pocket, went through his progressions, didn't make any detrimental mistakes. Of course, there was the interception to Caleb Downs at the end. Speaking of that, Caleb Downs, why is he still playing? That is textbook targeting. And they're like, no targeting. He launched. He led with the crown of his helmet. That's a defenseless receiver against Khalil Dinkins. He hits him in the head and shoulders. That is textbook targeting. And they're like, you know what? It's not. We're good. And the broadcasters were like, oh, yeah, that's targeting. And they're like, well, they changed their mind. I'm sitting here thinking, I'm like, I'm crazy. I'm being gaslit by the Fox broadcasters and the referee crew. Just take targeting out of the equation. That's my 2 cents on that. But Caleb Downs is still in the game, makes the interception because he's better at reading an offense than Grunkemeyer is at reading a defense. And you have the interception. That was the only costly play that Grunk made, but he wasn't putting the football in harm's way. He looked comfortable in the pocket, and Ohio State was dialing up pressure too. And I for a second-year quarterback in a second career start against the second best defense in the country at a minimum, Grunk did well. There's no moral victories here, right? How many? But I do want to give out some moral victories. So players quit on both sides. Like I said, coaches quit. Andy Kotelnicki. My point here was that you had a quarterback that was willing to risk it in the pocket, was willing to sit back there, allow the play to develop, and still give those passing concepts a chance, and you wouldn't call anything. So is it time to fire Andy Kotelnicki? And I do not like these conversations because I don't like calling for another man's job, but we're going to have it. Okay. So I don't make these conversations. Like I said, I don't have these conversations lightly. And that's why I want to preface it the way that I do. We are going to talk about that next here, coming up on a live post-game show here on Locked On Nittany Lions. Today's episode is brought to you by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride with more IIH Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else. From footwork to breathwork, athlete sweat, all the details, Mazda brings the same intention to how we craft every model. You can feel the Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to available Napa leather upholstery. You can make any day drive, everyday drives, feel like anything but. From smooth handling to intuitive controls, with all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can make your drives with confidence through almost any season. Like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. That's Mazda. Mazda, move and be moved. Again, I appreciate each and every one of you for checking out this live post-game show here. If you're new to the channel, well, thank you so much. Subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts for the latest conversations around all your favorite Penn State sports teams. Wrestling's coming up, so we'll have plenty of conversations there. Talk about football. So still to come in this show, we're going to talk about Andy Kotelnicki, and we're also going to talk about the head coaching search, because did somebody just have an in-person interview today for the Penn State head coaching job? We'll talk about that later as well, and get your comments. So the second half of the show will be devoted entirely to the live chat and everything and anything that I think of on the spot. As far as the agenda goes, Andy Kotelnicki does not look like he wants to be coaching another Penn State football game. Because if he did, he would make the necessary adjustments. And I'm not even talking about play calling. I am talking about personnel changes. Kobe Howard and Tyser Denmark are not playing. Why? Terry Smith doesn't make that call. I figured it was Marcus Hagans or Stan Drayton that on game, because for the most part, I think this is more typical in the NFL, where position coaches decide who goes in on a drive-by-drive basis. I think it's to each their own. Every team, every head coach is going to operate differently. But according to Terry Smith, and then before that, the conversation was, well, it's James Franklin's decision, or it's Kotelnicki and Jim Knowles' decision who goes in. And my thought process was, well, it's Stan Drayton. Certainly it's Marcus Hagans. It's not. It's Kotelnicki. So Kobe Howard and Tyser Denmark, when they don't play, that is Kotelnicki's decision. When Singleton goes in and Allen gets benched, that has been Kotelnicki's decision. I am not here to say that Hudson, Pena, and Ross, because Ross has actually been pretty good. Out of any of the wide receivers, the only one that should not be questioned, period, is Devontae Ross. But Pena and Hudson, you know what? You haven't lived up to the expectations since week one. Part of that, again, offensive line hasn't looked great. You know, quarterback timing's been off, whether that's Drew Aller or Ethan Grunkemeyer. I get it. But Kobe Howard and Tyser Denmark, see if they just give you something. Something. And that's why I don't know that it's best for Kotelnicki to keep calling plays and to be employed for the rest of the season. When Penn State's going in a different direction anyway, you might as well give Ty Howell another opportunity here, because I think Ty Howell still has a bright future as an offensive mind, as a coordinator, as a play caller, hopefully at Penn State at the end of the day, but wherever it's going to be, I think Ty Howell is one of the best up and coming coaches. So Kotelnicki is doing a disservice to himself. He's doing a disservice to this team at this point in time, because why you refuse to, and I don't know what that is. Is that a refusal? Did you just shut down? Did you just basically say, oh man, Ohio State's starting to pull away, I got nothing? Well, then that's not somebody that should be calling plays at this point in time for a Division I, a Big Ten team that still has a lot of pride to play for. And it's just embarrassing, because it's a run up the middle or it's a screenplay. And notice when I say basic because it looks basic when there's not all these bells and whistles attached to it. When it's just, let's line up. Let's tell the defense, we are throwing this football. Stop this route concept, because that's what Ohio State did. They said, oh, we're throwing the football. Stop Jeremiah Smith. Good luck. And that's how it translated to a ton of points. Penn State doesn't have that. But Penn State at least has competent and capable receivers that give you an opportunity. Kobe Howard showed that. He's not going to go off for right now, because I think in due time, I'll tell you what, if Ty Howell becomes the offensive coordinator for the final few games and is calling plays, Kobe Howard very well might have a 7-catch, 120-yard, 2-touchdown performance if he gets the consistent playing time at the end of the season. I don't want to lose these guys to the portal if I'm Penn State. I don't. Kobe Howard's a good ball player. Tyser Denmark. But they might just be I'm tired of this. I don't want to be associated with Penn State. I want out. And I don't blame them at the end of the day. But Kotelnicki to just put Penn State, Ohio State did nothing. They were Penn State was out-talented to a point by the Buckeyes. They just overmatched them with talent at the end of the day. But Matt Patricia wasn't dialing up anything super complex or difficult. Again, from my point of view, the way I saw it. Simple base formations. We're going to have two safeties over the top. And they just said, just stay home. Just stay home. We'll blitz a couple defenders here and there. Arvell Reese was getting home against Drew Shelton. That's what I mean when I say they just had a massive talent advantage. But Kotelnicki was not doing anything to help them out. And when they did run those plays, that's what was so frustrating. So I get when people say it, because I said, well, I tried to justify it. The gimmicks do help from time to time. Not all the time, but they can be helpful at points in times. It was always the second that Grunkemeyer gets into rhythm, Kotelnicki's like, you got to stop that. You can't do that. Let's bring in Liam Clifford at quarterback. If I'm calling the plays, again, I'm a podcast host. I'm not going to have that job title. I'm not going to have the job title of being an offensive coordinator. But if I'm going to call plays from the couch, why is that not to start your drive, to kickstart your drive? Because you slam on the brakes. Grunkemeyer completes, does a little abracadabra, is able to move out of the pocket, complete a pass to Devontae Ross or Trevor Pena when you don't expect them to convert on 3rd and 11, and then you flip it to Liam Clifford. You just got Grunk to manufacture some rhythm, some momentum. That is coaching malpractice. And I don't know what happened. It was there last season to an extent, but not as egregious as this. I think because Penn State was just rolling on offense that there wasn't as much pressure. There wasn't as much responsibility where, hey, Kotelnicki can be wrong, but it's okay because Singleton and Allen and the offensive line, and you have Bo Prabula as a backup quarterback to run the 2-quarterback gimmick system. Now that Kotelnicki, it's like, you got to get your stuff together, man. You got to be a little more strategic here. You don't have this room. You don't have this margin for error anymore. And that's what it really came down to, is the second Kotelnicki lost that margin for error, he's had no response. So a good coordinator would rotate the wide receivers in a little more. A good coordinator would say, we're going to lean on Katron Allen and get the ball to Singleton in select situations. A good coordinator would, I've been calling for wildcat formations, not with Liam Clifford. You have Singleton and Allen who project as future NFL running backs. I know Singleton's draft stock is diminished. That's not what I'm here to argue. Different conversation. But these are still two guys that are veterans, have played a ton of college football. And they are two of your 11 best players on offense. Why is that not being utilized? Why is that not even being tested, tried? Andy Kotelnicki is supposed to be this creative genius and too gimmicky to a fault. And yet I haven't seen any of the gimmicks that I've been expecting. Maybe I'm expecting too much. I'm not 100% sure there. But with Kotelnicki's inability to make changes when the head coach, this is the bottom line. Bottom line right here. Terry Smith said that Kobe Howard and Tyseer Denmark are going to get more playing time. Not definitively like that, but alluding to it and saying these guys should be getting more playing time. That's an insult to the head coach. If it's on Kotelnicki to cycle in running backs and wide receivers and tight ends, and he has that responsibility, you are defying Terry Smith when he says, I think these guys should be getting more playing time. You are intentionally ignoring your superior. Get out. That's the bottom line. Is if you are not going to listen to the head coach that says we need to rotate our receivers in more frequently, then you're not the man for the job anymore, because that's who you're answering to at the end of the day. The offensive coordinator has as much autonomy as he should, and same with Jim Knowles on defense. And because the offense was so, defense didn't do great. I will give them credit where credit's due. They look better overall, but the offense wasn't helping them out. No complimentary football whatsoever. You're not doing your job. It's fine if they part ways at this point in time, because again, Kotelnicki is showing me personally that he does not want to coach at Penn State anymore. That's what I'm seeing. Okay. Head coaching search. Brian Hartline sure made a statement in his in-person interview today. This was one of those practical interviews. This wasn't a sit-down Q&A. No, this was let me dominate my potential future employer here. So did Hartline do enough to potentially get the job? Well, Penn State does have tangible interviews set up with other head coaching candidates. We'll talk about the latest here on a live edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Today's show is brought to you by Peloton. Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with the brand new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus, powered by Peloton IQ. It's their most advanced equipment yet, designed to give you real-time guidance and endless ways to move, whether you're running, lifting, or cross-training with your favorite instructors. This is training reimagined. Peloton is built for breakthroughs with tools that help you plan, stay motivated, and reach peak performance. You will love the Peloton IQ system and how it offers real-time strength coaching. It actually tracks your reps, suggests the right weights, and corrects your form, making every rep safer and smarter. The swivel screen is a game changer. You can go from running on the Tread Plus to strength training without missing a beat. And the personalized class recommendations keep you engaged. You get workouts tailored to your vibe and energy level each week. So let yourself run, lift, flex, and push forward. Explore the new Peloton Cross Training Tread Plus today at onepeloton.com. That is onepeloton.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by DoorDash. The weekend is here, and it's time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order, these players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it down. For Penn State, hey, I know it's a losing effort here. I'm going to go with Chaz Coleman, because when I look at individual performances, there's a lot to take away for, players that did do well, or they did things right. They played above expectations. I mean, Chaz Coleman came to play today. This is a guy that's still giving 110%. In my argument in the halftime show, I said that he helped manufacture 11 points for Penn State by getting pressure on Julian Sayin to force a field goal, pass rush, wins one-on-one against the guard, and then saves a touchdown and forces a field goal with his pressure, and then recovers a fumble to help set up Penn State for 7 more points. So that's keeping 4 points away from Ohio State and giving 7 to Penn State. One player manufactured 11 points in this game, even though it wasn't enough. Chaz Coleman came through. He delivered, no hesitation, no delay. And if you've been following along, you know that this kind of performance wasn't a fluke by Chaz Coleman. And just like Coleman delivered for Penn State, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays with DoorDash Streaks. You save every Saturday you order. Stack it up all season. You could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through November 18th. All right. Final segment of what we need to cover with the agenda. And then we are going into the live chat for give or take the next half hour. That's how we do this on these live post-game shows. So bear with me if you're waiting for our conversation over in the live chat. I will get to the comments after we talk about the head coaching search for Penn State, because that's what matters at this point, right? The Ohio State game, it is what it is. 38-14 the final. Brian Hartline, was that an incredible audition? Was that the audition that everybody was looking for? Possibly. I like Brian Hartline a ton as a head coach. I really do. I don't know how you go wrong with Hartline as a head coach, because it worked with Dan Lanning. It worked with Kirby Smart. It worked with Marcus Freeman. And I'm not saying that's the end all be all, but Hartline, if you have question marks about him, if you have concerns, I am willing to give him somewhat of a grace period to get that upside, to get that potential. to get his connections, to get his recruiting ability, his player development into State College for Penn State. And he called a heck of a game. Didn't have to do anything crazy, of course, but he had the right answers at the right time for a lot of this game. I mean, your quarterback going 20 of 23. Now, granted, you have Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith. I understand that, but you're maximizing what's at your disposal. Don't you want a piece of that if you're Penn State? I'm not here to say that, oh, Penn State's now going to get the Jeremiah Smith of that respective recruiting class. But what about the next guy or the guy after that or the guy after that? And it's all a step up from what Penn State has presently. And if you get the wide receivers, you get the wide receiver factory to come over to Happy Valley with Brian Hartline. You're going to get the quarterbacks by proxy because they're going to want to throw to those elite wide receivers. I mean, Carnell Tate looks like a first-round pick. We know what Jeremiah Smith is as a potential top 3 NFL draft pick overall in the first round. Why would you not want that if you're Penn State? So I somewhat, not as serious with this, but, Penn State, they may have lost today, but they're going to get the last laugh when they get another one of Ohio State's assistant coaches. Okay, it didn't really work with Jim Knowles, but that's kind of a two birds with one stone situation because Jim Knowles is only in year 1 of rebuilding Penn State's defense, and it shouldn't have been a rebuild. That's what did James Franklin in, making those kinds of decisions. This was a win now moment, and you brought in a guy that needs to build up his system. Well, that's going to cost you in some regard, and it did. Cost him a lot. And I'm here to say, if you get somebody that is aligned with Jim Knowles' defense, you don't need to cash out on Jim Knowles. You don't need to push him out of town. Give him the leverage to keep up this rebuild. You might as well. You're in year 1. If it takes 3 years, you might as well do it. He's still one of the best defensive coordinators in my mind. He needs the personnel to help out because at times I'm watching the defense and I'm thinking to myself, is it a Jim Knowles problem or is it a player execution problem where guys are just missing assignments? They're missing reads. There's a lot of responsibility. There's a lot of ownership on the players to make the right. It's like a wide receiver sometimes, especially with the defensive backs where it's an option route. And you got to be able to read the defender. In the defender's case, you have to be able to read the offensive play to make the right decision. That's tough if you haven't done it. And it's a big, tall ask of Jim Knowles to do. But I'm saying you don't have to cash out on that. You can continue that development and keep building that as opposed to saying we're done, it's over with, unless you get somebody that doesn't want Jim Knowles as the defensive coordinator. Brian Hartline, I think you can get the best of both worlds. You can get his potential, his upside, his ceiling. You can keep Jim Knowles and then build around all of that. Not my preferred candidate, Mike Elko, Kalen DeBoer. And I know I'm going to have to preface this every time for people that listen to me for the first time or haven't heard this part of the conversation. Those are the preferred candidates by both myself and Penn State. But if they keep winning, then there's no opportunity to even have those conversations, have those negotiations. But there was mutual interest. It's been reported that there's been mutual interest between Mike Elko and Penn State and Kalen DeBoer and Penn State. But Alabama and Texas A&M are going to be inclined to keep those head coaches since they keep winning. So where does that leave Penn State right now? Brian Hartline is an option. I don't think he's the top option from Penn State's point of view. Top options include one guy who's actually going to be interviewing on the bye week. This comes from 24/7. That was actually reported. Brent Key of Georgia Tech is going to interview for the job. There's a lot of candidates that Penn State couldn't go wrong with. Hartline, Elko, DeBoer, Lee from Vanderbilt, Brent Key, from Georgia Tech. You could go wrong with Matt Rule, but now Matt Rule's off the board. You could go wrong with Manny Diaz because I don't know what Manny Diaz and Matt Rule would have given you after James Franklin. What do they do? What upside do they offer that James Franklin didn't have? You need to get something that James Franklin didn't have. And that Brent Key, I think, gives you that. He coached under Nick Saban. Okay, that's a major plus. no Northeast recruiting ties, but because of the transfer portal, that's okay. He's an offensive line guy, physical, tough mindset. You need that in the Big Ten. I think Brent Key would fit very well, which is why Georgia Tech is succeeding in the ACC, because I don't know that mentality exists across the board of let's just go out physical the other team. Bottom line, I think Brent Key would do very well at Penn State because he'd get the resources, he'd get the backing, he'd be able to build a solid foundation coaching staff around him. But we'll see. That's one candidate that Penn State is going to interview. Again, I hope Texas A&M and Alabama lose in some regard, because Mike Elko's my preferred candidate and should be Penn State's, because he's from New Jersey. He graduated from the University of Pennsylvania. So there's that Northeast connection that I've been talking about. Elite defense. He's one of those guys that let's just go out physical the other team. Let's just go dominate them and just play smash mouth football. That would work in the Big Ten, of course, because that's what the Big Ten, that's its identity. And what a quick turnaround. He continues to win at every single level. Wins at Duke, wins at Texas A&M. Great coach. Great coach. So I will see what ultimately Penn State's able to do. LSU, I thought LSU was going to be a lot tougher of competition to go and get head coaches, because, okay, if Penn State can't get Mike Elko, if Penn State can't get Kalen DeBoer as its preferred candidates, it seems like Urban Meyer is off the board as well, as like one of those fantasy long shot type of situations. What direction would they go in? Well, now LSU is on the market. Florida is on the market. That's inconvenient for Penn State. Penn State's the better job than both of them. Florida, I don't know what's going on over there. I could say the same thing about LSU. You have politicians getting involved. What head coach would want politicians making decisions about your football team? That's a horrible situation. I don't care what resources you have no stability. A politician could turn on you and you're out of a job. I know that Brian Kelly didn't do what he was supposed to do. That's not why Brian Kelly was ultimately fired, but you don't know at the end of the day. I'm speaking in that regard because of the athletic director. The athletic director for Louisiana, for LSU, did a pretty good job other than hiring Brian Kelly. But Scott Woodward was a solid athletic director, and Louisiana State politicians said, you're fired. And again, the politicians were weighing in on Brian Kelly and how LSU athletics were operating and stuff like that. You don't want that. Penn State's the best job. Penn State doesn't come open very often. I can say that with confidence and assurance now, because a week ago I was thinking, man, this is rough. LSU's on the market. Florida's on the market. Auburn opens up. As of right now, none of those jobs compare to Penn State. Sure, they're all close. They're all relative to one another. But when you actually lay it out, Penn State's a good margin ahead of those jobs. So they'll be able to get the preferred candidate at the end of the day. Whether that it ends up being, because it's Kurt Cignetti, Matt Rule, okay. Most Penn State fans didn't want Matt Rule. If it comes down to Joe Brady, Brian Hartline, Elko, DeBoer, Brent Key, Clark Leah, all those guys are realistic options for Penn State. And I don't think they can go wrong with any of them. You get a different benefit that you didn't have with James Franklin, but that's where things stand presently. Okay, that's my agenda. I think that's everything that is covered here. So we can get into the more nonchalant. It's still going to be pretty fired up to an extent here with how we talk about this game, because I know that people are charged up. You don't like losing to Ohio State. You don't play Ohio State if you're Penn State for, 2028. And you got to deal with 9 losses in a row. I mean, I'd still like to see Penn State play Ohio State, but I think a break is necessary. A break is definitely overdue. So thank you for your patience in the live chat. Let's start from the top, shall we? I love how Kobe Howard gets one target all game and it's the longest completion of the game. Yes, when it comes to those simplified, when it's just we're going to line up and pass, we're going to run different route concepts, and oh, you get a chunk play at 25 yards. That's what I'm referring to earlier in the show. When Penn State is executing the shovel pass and the jet sweep, they're unstoppable. Yep. Okay, I see where the Pat Kraft, fire this whole coaching staff. Program needs a reboot, new philosophy, culture. It's bad right now, offense abysmal. I wouldn't push out the entire coaching staff again. You have Dan Connor on staff, you have Deion Barnes, Terry Smith. I get what you're saying. Probably the people that have influence and control. Terry Smith, I want him to be on a future Penn State staff. I would like to keep Deion Barnes and Dan Connor. But again, if somebody outside comes in, they're going to want their own coaches and their own staff members. So you don't want to just clean house just because, well, it seems, what is there? I would like to see Ty Howell call plays. I would like Deion Barnes and Dan Connor to continue to have a role because they've proven they're really good. They are really good. And for anybody said, well, linebacker's terrible. Dan Connor's in year one. That's not his fault. It's not his fault with what Penn State is. How to beat a Jim Knowles defense, do pretty much anything you want. Part of it is Jim Knowles being out schemed to an extent. Part of it is make a tackle, make the right read, cover. I look at individual assignments and sometimes I just don't know. I just don't know what players are doing in their given situations. From number 2 in the country to 0-9 in conference. Joke. There's no better way to sum it up, right? This was the furthest thing that I thought. I thought Penn State's basement would be 8-4 this season. I didn't think we'd be here. And you have to take a step. You have to take steps backwards to sometimes go forward, right? So I don't know that if Penn State went 9-3, if they went 8-4, that James Franklin gets fired. It needed to fall apart like this to get to this point. So if this was going to be the result at the end of the day, if James Franklin and Penn State were going to miss the college football playoff and not win any of their big games, you lose to Ohio State, you lose to Oregon, you lose to Indiana, you lose to Iowa, right? That was that worst case scenario. Oh, surely Penn State is they'll be able to win all the other games. Well, clearly they're not. But that going 8-4 and losing all of those games wouldn't have gotten Franklin. I don't think that would have gotten Franklin fired. Maybe it might have been on the table. They might have looked at it. But I like that it got this bad this quickly if that was the other result. If you gave me 2 options and you said, you have the season's tanked, it's a wash, it's embarrassing, it's a joke, you can laugh about it, how it's unprecedented, and James Franklin gets fired. Or option number 2, you miss the playoffs. Basically, everything's the same except you win inconsequential conference games. All for what? It's not the Outback Bowl anymore, but that's what I'm thinking. Oh, they 8-4 and they get to go to a bowl. What? No, I would rather it get to this point. I'd rather it be a complete change and a complete overhaul than just, well, they went 8-4. They won the games they were supposed to with, bringing all the NFL players back for an extra season, and they got Jim Knowles. I would rather it happen this way because it means that Penn State's going to be better because of it if they make the right hire. That's only predicated on if they make the right hire. Okay, so here's the debate. I'm sorry, but we should not bring back Jim Knowles under any circumstances, under select circumstances. If you go get somebody with a different defensive philosophy, then tell Jim Knowles goodbye. But if you can build up his defensive system rather than if the fundamentals are still there, right? If Brian Hartline specifically becomes the head coach, why would you not want Jim Knowles as your defensive coordinator? You're already in year 2. You got the worst out of the way. Continue to build it rather than cashing out. So that's also something else that it's also, you have to be able to retain a lot of these players too. So Dennis Sutton, Zane Durant, and others will go off to the NFL. But if you get Amari Campbell back, right? I don't know. I will be able to give you a straightforward answer the second we hit the transfer portal and actual head coach is hired. And then we see, okay, does Amari Campbell stay? Does Tony Rojas stay? Does King Max stay? I know AJ Harris hasn't been great, but again, it's year 1. Do a bulk of those players stick around? If they do, then actually, yeah, it makes sense to keep Jim Knowles. If they don't, then okay, there you kind of have your answer, because then you start year 1 over again, and I don't want that. I don't know that I necessarily want that. Let's see. NIL, kids getting paid huge amounts of money with zero contractual obligations. What could possibly go wrong? Yeah, if your season falls apart, you got your paychecks, and these guys are paid up front. None of this is incentivized. It's you get your millions up front, and if you have poor performance, you don't have any consequences for that. Let's see. So we have this even dialed back further. Penn State showed up for 1 quarter. I did 1/2. Guy, you're poking fun at the title. Well, it was 17-14. I think people were like, "No, what's going on? What's going on with Ohio State?" I did not think Penn State was going to win this game. I didn't think it would get out of hand that quickly, but I did not think that Penn State would win today by any means. We make football hard. Yes. Yes, football does not This is something that someone mentioned to me the other day, maybe a week ago. When was the last time anybody had fun watching Penn State football? Even though Penn State would win some of those games, it was exhausting. Because, oh, that's great, they won against West Virginia. I guess that's the last time. But even still, it's like, was that fun at the end of the day? Was that interesting? Was that exciting? It's been a long time, since 2019, 18, where Penn State football wasn't so painful to watch. I would say there was a glimmer of it against USC. That game was just exciting. It was enticing. Penn State came out with a win. They went to overtime. That was a game that not everybody was, some people, a good amount. I was probably a 50-50 split, but there were people that were saying USC should win that game. That's probably the one-off instance. But 2020 COVID season didn't happen in my mind. I don't even consider it, but it is what it is. 2021, they went 7-5, and they got embarrassed by Arkansas in the Outback Bowl. 2022 was, that wasn't fun. 2022 was fun because they went to the Rose Bowl. They beat Utah. So 2022 was the last time that there was, because Penn State was playing above expectations. People viewed that team for the most part as, hey, they're 8-4, maybe 9-3. But it was still the same ending, other than the Rose Bowl, where they lose to the better teams, Ohio State, Michigan. So it ended all the same. But as far as the excitement or not looking like football is a struggle, 2019 was the last time that was really the case. Basketball season for you guys. Yes, Penn State men's basketball and the Lady Lions get underway. There's no other winter sports that Penn State's good at. None. It's absolutely basketball season. I'm kidding, by the way. It is wrestling season. This is a wrestling school. We are going to talk about wrestling a ton. Talk about hockey too, because hockey's 9-1 and swept Ohio State. That's how you're supposed to do it. That is what you're supposed to do. Anyone that thought Penn State would win this game after the first half was sure wrong. It looked cool, it gave you a sense of belief, but no, Penn State eventually, again, Even if Penn State had kept it close, Ohio State would have just won simply by just being the more talented team. When they got the scheme, when they got execution, and then they got the talent all together for half of the third quarter, that was it. Let's see. Totally disagree. All things considered, I think Penn State did quite well. In the first half, sure. In the second half, not at all. Do we want to compare the? I can pull up the stats. I can pull up the stats from today's game, and we can go and look at the comparison between the first half and the second half. It is not pretty. So let me pull that up real quick. Because the first half looked like there were positives. Some players did some things right. All right. Now, when I go to comparison, and I think I can do by half. Why, yes, I can. All right. First half versus second half. All right. First half, 17-14. Second half, 21-0. Total yards. Ohio State 2 in the first half, 221 for Ohio State, 140 for Penn State. In the second half, 259 to 60. Penn State didn't even get half of its yardage in the second half. Rushing yards. Ohio State 53 in the first half. Penn State 76 in the first half. You outrushed Ohio State. Terry Smith said that's what. Oh, but wait. Second half. Ohio State 111 rushing yards to, can anyone guess? Can anyone take a guess? And remember, quarterback sacks are included in the statistic, which I don't like. -21. 111 to -21 rushing yards. Oh, did Penn State won the penalty battle for anybody that cares? Good on Penn State. They won the penalty battle there. Time of possession was fairly even, so you could make the argument that Penn State won the time of possession battle. Turnovers, Ohio State had one in the first half, but and then here's sacks. Ohio State, nobody gave up any pressure, or there was pressure, but never translated into a QB sack. 0-0 in the first half. Second half, Ohio State 4, Penn State 0. So please tell me what Penn State did right in the second half, because the first half doesn't matter when you have the entirety of the second half. I don't think Pat Kraft has any plan to fix this with a big hire. I think Penn State's gonna get their choice of candidate. They are the best job on the market right now. All things considered, they are the best job on the market. Now, if Texas comes open, well, because Steve Sarkisian could go off to the NFL. I'm now believing firing Franklin was a big mistake. To get what? To do what? What would this team do? What would this team do differently right now with James Franklin at the helm? Yeah, the refs screwed up on 2 plays. Again, the refs aren't going to, you lose 38-14. You probably have more issues to be concerned about than the referees, but the Ohio State fumble after forward progress. Okay, so you're saying the refs did not get that right, that he was still moving forward and there was the play was still going and forward progress was not stopped, according to the Fox broadcast. So maybe somebody saw or heard something different. And yeah, that was textbook targeting. Change the rule, or I think that players should. I don't like because I agree with most commentators when they say I don't like that players get suspended for it. It used to be a full game, if I'm not mistaken. Then it was just, now it's just a half. But what about a drive? You're suspended for the remainder of that drive and then the next one. I think that's fair. Where you're suspended for the rest of the quarter in that specific game. So if you get a targeting call in the fourth quarter, yeah, you're done. If you get it in the third quarter, you can come back for the fourth. I think that's because too many people get away with it, and that's the problem. Why have the rule if you don't enforce it? If you don't call it? It's a dumb rule, and it's a waste of everybody's time if you're not going to enforce it. It was textbook targeting, and Caleb Downs should have missed the rest of the game. But they don't call it as much anymore because they don't like the suspension aspect of it. So just write out the rule. Just say, we're making an executive decision here. If you get called for targeting, you're now only suspended for the next drive or the next quarter. It's not the first half of the next game. Just why do we act like the NCAA can't do those things? Like they just can't make an executive decision and say, this rule is dumb, we're changing it in the middle of the season. It doesn't count against stats. It doesn't count against scores. And what, do you have to scheme for it? Do you have a game plan for it? Just change the rule if you think it's stupid. I think it's stupid. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot to totally mention Bob Chesney. Yes, Bob Chesney out of James Madison is definitely on Penn State's radar. Would he be Penn State's best option? I would take, a Brian Hartline, a Joe Brady. Again, all things considered, no logistics. Mike Elko, Kalen DeBoer. But Bob Chesney is certainly up there. And I would be, it wouldn't be the most exciting hire, but I just listening to him, I like the way that Kenny Dillingham's another one. Just kind of see if you can get him away from Arizona State, his alma mater. I think that would be a fine hire as well. Someone who's been able to build the idea. Well, he's not succeeding as well as Arizona State. Arizona State isn't in the same conversation as Penn State when it comes to resources and alignment. Let me tell you that much. You give Kenny Dillingham a war chest, have fun. It's going to be it's going to be a lot of fun. So I see some more comments about Kobe Howard. Here we are. How many total snaps did Kobe Howard get today, and how many for Denmark? With the stats that I have pulled up, I wonder if I can find that for individual players. It wasn't a lot. It wasn't a lot of snaps. All I know is that Kobe Howard, so Tyser Denmark didn't have any catches. He might have played a little bit. I don't remember seeing Denmark on the field all that much. And I remember seeing Kobe Howard because social media would announce it and say, Kobe Howard's on the football field. And then it's like, okay, great. Where is he lining up? So Howard had the most yards per reception with 26. How many catches did he have with that? 1. It really is. I like what I saw from Gronk a ton. I love what I saw from Gronk today. Let's see here. A lot of back and forth in the comments about different things that I am not going to highlight, but I can see what you're saying. Yes, next week Penn State is going up against an Indiana team. This is going to be bad. Number 1 and number 2 teams in the country, respectively. Unless Indiana were to lose. I know Maryland's at least given them a fight. It's 10-3. It's 10-3. I'm sad has fallen so far. You guys need Hartline. I agree. I think Brian Hartline would be an A hire. It's worth rolling the dice to get what Brian Hartline has in terms of his connections, player development, and then you build a coaching staff around him. You don't just leave him on an island and say, okay, come up with your game plan. You help him out. You give him the resources to maximize what he's good at and to work on any of his shortcomings. Andy Kotelnicki needs to go. Yeah, I agree at this point, especially because it seems like when you're not giving an effort, for me, it's if Kobe Howard and Tyser Denmark are rotating in frequently, I'm seeing different passing concepts. I'm seeing you commit to what's working well versus what's not. You just don't want to be there anymore. That's what that means. And why take that opportunity why take that opportunity from Ty Howell at this point in time? Let's see what other comments. No, Penn State's not making it to the playoffs. If anybody, I hope nobody's trying to to argue that. Kotelnicki and Jim Knowles should return their salaries. Oh, no returns on investment there. Nope. And you have to pay their buyout too. That's part of it. Yes, we want Brian Hartline now. Mike Yurcich 2.0. I think so. If I'm speaking about Andy Kotelnicki, so there were some issues with the way that Mike Yurcich coached up Drew and everything else. Like the reason somebody gets fired is because there isn't anybody to go to bat for them. And Mike Yurcich didn't basically have any friends at that point in time. I don't think there was anybody that was going to bat for Yurcich from that time in 2023. Kotelnicki wasn't bad in 2024. That was a top 15 offense. A lot of things broke down. Hindsight's 2020, but it's not just. I'm judging Kotelnicki off of where we are in the present. If you are not going to change your playbook, if you are not going to, again, it shouldn't be this bad. And you're not trying anything different. Oh, Liam Clifford's in at quarterback. We're trying something new. It's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about passing concepts. Terry Smith challenged you publicly to fix the intermediate and deep passing attack, and you refuse. You don't have an answer for it. If your employer says you need to do XYZ and it's reasonable, we just need to see something in the intermediate and deep passing game. Ethan Grunkemeyer he wasn't the issue. The offensive line held up somewhat for the most part. The ground game, what you were doing was working. When you went 6 or 7 offensive linemen, it worked. Ohio State had no answer, and you just went away from it completely. Being down 10 does not mean that you need to scrap it completely. They just had, it's a fireable offense. It's a fireable offense at the end of the day. It's called titling and engagement, sir. Thank you. If you listen to the video, it was 17-14. If you listen to what I said that Penn State's still not going to win. But thank you. Let's see. CJ Donaldson was Penn State's MVP for the Nittany Lions with the fumble. I certainly helped out. And I know that Donaldson and Peoples have not been that good good on Ohio State for finding something with Bo Jackson. Why would Hartline go to Penn State for a pay raise for a head coaching job? Penn State's a top 10 job in college football. What does Hartline make right now? $1.5 million, $2 million max. He would get his salary would be tripled. It would be $5 or $6 million, if not more. And he would have total control and get to build a program. Why would Brian Hartline want that? That's stupid. Why would he want that? I always get shuffled in the comments section here. I scroll past. 0-9 is definitely on the table. Let's look at the remaining schedule for when we're talking about conference schedule. They'll lose to Indiana. They could actually beat Michigan State. It's not a guarantee, but I would favor Penn State in that game by, I would say over a field goal. I would say 4 or 5 points right now. Michigan State just benched its quarterback. They just benched, I think they benched Aiden Childs, or maybe he's hurt. I just know he's not starting. And Jonathan Smith might get fired as Michigan State's head coach. So they're just down. They're just as down bad too as Penn State. So that's a win. Nebraska, probably a loss, but that's at home. According to the ESPN matchup predictor, Penn State would be favored, just saying. And then at Rutgers, Penn State's favored in that one. So 0-9 is on the table, but if I like to be a betting man when I'm in the mood, I would say that Penn State wins at least one. I would say Penn State wins at least one of those, the final remainder. They lose to Indiana. Michigan State's a game that I would give them a strong chance in. Nebraska, but that one's at Beaver Stadium. and lean Penn State against Rutgers. Again, depending on everybody being healthy, right? If they lose key players, lose key starters, then that becomes a different story. So let's see. Zach Seiko is an honest man. That's all I try to be. I try to be honest. I try to be authentic. I try to be entertaining, right? If we're going to suffer through this, we're going to at least have fun doing it. But yes, I try to be honest. So appreciate that. I got what I'm going for. I'm getting the response that I'm trying to get. Yes, Indiana is struggling with Maryland. It hasn't been pretty, but, and I see people saying Ohio State could have beaten Penn State by 50 plus. Oh, absolutely. They dialed it back because there's bigger fish to fry. They know that. What happened to Deni Dennis Sutton and Zane Durant this year? If we're talking about recently, it's effort. If we're talking about overall scheme, Zane Durant does not fit in Jim Knowles' system. At least what they're asking him to do. The two defensive tackles, they are asking him to be a run, one tech interior type, and he just keeps getting double teamed. So it's not his fault. Zane Durant didn't magically get worse, but they're asking him to do things that he is not meant to do as a smaller defensive tackle. So that's Deni Dennis Sutton. I think he packed it in as well, especially this game. It just, I saw a little effort, and I don't blame him when he's going to be an NFL player. Why risk injury? Why risk anything for your future? Dennis Sutton. Here's another thing with it though. So Durant and Dennis Sutton, they don't get the same opportunities to maximize their talent because they're having to overcompensate for the rest of the defense. I've said this. I said that if you listen to my previews leading up throughout the week, I said, if in order to go after Penn State's defense, you need to do three things. You need to take Deni Dennis Sutton out of the play, which Ohio State did and which every team has done. You need to take Zane Durant out of the play, which most teams are doing. And you need to take Amari Campbell out of the play. After that, okay, awesome. And selectively Chaz Coleman. But Chaz Coleman shows up because they check off, and that doesn't happen enough. But you double team Deni, or you run the play away from him. You can't make a tackle if you run to the right, Deni's on the left, you run to the right, you run away from him, you can't make a play. So you scheme your plays away from Deni Dennis Sutton, you double team to Zane Durant, and then you get a hat on Amari Campbell, and then that leaves the secondary and Dom DeLuca as your last line of defense at the second level if you get your play past the first level. Maddening, is it? Very, very maddening. More Bob Chesney support in the chat. We like Bob Chesney. Again, not my top candidate, but I like him. I put him in the same category as Kenny Dillingham. Head coaching experience, proven that he can win at a lower level. Can he take on a job like Penn State? I would like to think so. But you're not going to know until you try. See if we have any other thoughtful, insightful comments. Okay. Not just bickering or insults or things like that. Which coach is coming to Penn State today? Or for this week, it's Brent Key from Georgia Tech. As far as Brian Hartline, I'm somewhat joking when I say that he did an informal job interview, but in a way he did. It wasn't a serious, hey, on the record, but Pat Kraft had a lot to watch from the sideline today of what Brian Hartline did to Penn State's defense. A lot of comments about Indiana, Maryland. Man, the live chat just keeps going on and on. I appreciate all of you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Really appreciate it. Let's see here. Manny Diaz fits the Penn State mold better than Brian Hartline. Why do we say that? Just because he coached there? I would argue that Brian Hartline is better. There are some misconceptions about Manny Diaz. Manny Diaz is a really good defensive coordinator. What does he do that's different? See, I'm looking for different. And this is where I'll wrap up, because as I keep scrolling through the comments, they just keep going. And I do appreciate it, but we're at an hour. So, but this is a fair a fair topic to address to wrap things up. Manny Diaz, the only connection he has to Penn State is that he was a defensive coordinator for a couple of seasons, and he was really good. But what does he do that's different than James Franklin? What does he give Penn State that's different than James Franklin? The key word is different. Brian Hartline may not have head coaching experience, but the way you get head coaching experience is you become the head coach. He has exceptional recruiting ties all across the country. Brian Hartline can go get receivers in Florida. He can go get them in Texas. He can go get them in the Northeast. He can go get them in the Midwest. James Franklin did not have that. Manny Diaz does not have that. Oh, well, Brian Hartline, he's not a defensive mastermind, and he's not really an offensive mastermind either, because he's only been an offensive coordinator for a couple of seasons, and it's his first year fully as a full-time play caller. He doesn't need to do any of that. I don't need him to do that. That's what an OC is for, and that's what a defensive coordinator is for. Go get the complementary parts to help out Brian Hartline. I want Brian Hartline at Penn State to amp up recruiting, to have better player development at key positions like quarterback and wide receiver, which Penn State has been missing for how many years? How many years? Because Sean Clifford was good. I think he gets a lot of unnecessary criticism, but he was good. He was okay. Okay. He was middle of the road. Drew Aller, underwhelming. Penn State's wide receivers after Parker Washington, completely underwhelming. I want all of that fixed. And you can go get coordinators to help out with any sort of game plan. You have general managers who can work with you in the portal and constructing this roster where it's not just all on Brian Hartline. So he hasn't done this. He hasn't done that. He doesn't need to. He just needs to do what he's been doing and then learn those other elements along the way. Oh, I can't help myself. We need Pitt's quarterback recruiting. Yeah, Eli Holstein got benched in the middle of the season. I don't want to hear it. They got a break with their freshman quarterback. Pitt's quarterback situation is no better than Penn State's, other than right this very moment, because Drew Aller's hurt and the freshman figured something out. But it was all Eli Holstein's a Heisman. Eli Holstein's a first-round pick. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I don't want to hear it. How everybody changes their tune the second it's convenient for them. All right, I saw that, and I'm done with it. So that is where I'm going to end things here on this live post-game show. Appreciate Penn State, Ohio State fans alike here to join this conversation. Congrats to the Buckeyes on their win. That is a national title contending team that should be the national title favorite, because when you have a top 3 defense, when you have a quarterback that completes 80, 90, almost it seems like 100% of his passes, the ground game will get going eventually. I really don't think we've seen Ohio State play at max capacity. I don't think we've seen Ohio State really just put its best foot forward. I think they dialed things back. And like the last postseason run, you will see them turn it up another gear. The Fox broadcast team talked about it. I agree with them. And you also have younger players that are only going to get better. Bo Jackson's only going to get better. True freshman running back. Sayin is only going to get better, which is a scary thought in the scheme of things. My name is Zach Sako. I'm the host of Locked On Nittany Lions. We do this daily. We talk about Penn State football, for better or for worse. We talk about wrestling only for the better, only for the great. And we'll also talk about basketball, recruiting, this head coaching search, hockey as well. So if you are new to the show, subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts, because like I said, all your favorite Penn State sports teams are covered here daily. Thank you so much for joining me on this live edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Appreciate the support from each and every one of you.